Welcome to Marin Voices and Views. With Peter B. Collins, I'm Larry Strick. We have a great show tonight. Greg Brockbank, City Councilman of San Rafael, is going to be our second guest. Before we get to Greg, however, Peter is going to introduce our first guest.
Phil Bronstein is now the editor-at-large of Hearst Newspapers, and he's a weekly columnist for the San Francisco Chronicle. He was the Chronicle's executive editor for 8 years after the Hearst takeover in 2000. And before that, he was editor of the struggling Afternoon Examiner, where he
Feisty, we like to say.
where he presided over many award-winning investigations and tried to turn a guy named Rob Morse into the next Herb Caen. Where is Rob? In the 1980s, he was nominated for a Pulitzer for his coverage of the Marcos family in the Philippines, and he also covered Reagan's wars in Central America. Phil lives in Mill Valley with his wife and 3 kids. Welcome, Phil.
Thank you, both of you. Thanks for having me on. I have a cold, so I think I'm seated far enough away. And I'm underdressed, as it turns out, but I'm sure you'll forgive me. This is Marin.
Now, you earned your stripes as a foreign correspondent and covering wars. Was it hard to be in the office, assigning reporters and determining coverage, say, during Bush's wars, the last 8 years?
It was nearly impossible. You know, there's the adrenaline fix, which is huge. And I won't try and attribute it to anything more noble than that. And then there's the idea of being in places where you can feel history shifting right under your feet. So being in the Philippines in 1983, 1986, being in El Salvador in 1989, you know, things were going on that you could tell were going to change the shape of everyone's lives. That's very heady and it's very gratifying. And you see people's behavior at the absolute sort of outskirts of civilization on both sides. You see the most extraordinary human individual courage, not necessarily talking about battlefield courage, and at the same time you find the most amoral, really. I mean, one guy I remember in El Salvador, shook his hand and looked into his eyes, and I felt like this guy was evil, incarnate. And I don't really think anybody is actually evil. So you had these experiences, and so it was difficult. And I remember actually when I first came back from all my foreign reporting, I think it was Yeltsin standing on the tank, or when they were shelling the Parliament building in Russia, and I remember sitting there watching it on TV, just like my nails digging into the chair.
Well, on a more local note, one of the big stories that probably sold a bunch of newspapers over the last few years in San Francisco, at least, was the Barry Bonds Balco case. And
yes, and cost us close to $1 million to try and prevent the government from forcing us to reveal our sources.
Well, that's an interesting component of it. But one of the things that I was thinking of, you got the biggest sports guy in the Bay Area, and one of the biggest sports teams in the Bay Area. And how does a sports team relate to a newspaper when you're looking at its main guy?
Well, I think, I can't speak for Henry Schulman, who's the lead writer for covering the Giants for the Chronicle, or any of other sports writers or columnists. But it seemed that they had a pretty reasonable relationship with most of the team. I mean, I've known Larry Baer for about 1.5 million years, and he and I are friends. And I have to say that World Series that we kind of snuck into the stadium. Not that we wanted to expose ourselves necessarily, because we probably would have been killed and eaten for dinner. But I think the sports writers, got treated with a fair amount of respect. Now, I don't think that Barry Bonds was all that friendly to anybody at any time. That was just the way he was and his personality. I had a different experience of him, outside of baseball. But I think for people like Lance Williams and Mark Fainer-Roata, who wrote those stories, I'm not sure they went to baseball games.
And the Bonds case and also the Josh Wolf case really cry out for a meaningful national shield law for journalists. And we still don't have that. You talked about the $1 million in defending the Chronicle's right not to reveal confidential sources.
Right.
But the Josh Wolf case was interesting because they basically took a very local issue, tried it as a federal matter in order to get around the California shield law.
Well, there were substantial differences between Josh's situation and the Balco situation, but it was all part of the same ongoing argument. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals was the last federal circuit court that had not ruled against the press on this issue. And so we were sort of looking at this going to the Ninth Circuit saying, God, we hope this doesn't happen to us, because Gonzalez, the Attorney General, he was fixated on this issue of the press's ability to maintain confidentiality of sources. I went back with our Hearst chief corporate counsel, Eve Burton, and occasionally Lance and Mark to Washington, and we lobbied. I mean, one could argue whether journalists should lobby, but in this case, we felt we were, doing it for the good of the profession,
Sure.
for a federal shield law, and in fact got a lot of people to move it along, including Nancy Pelosi, who was very accommodating and very agreeable to this notion that this was pretty critical. And she helped get it off the shelf in the House, to dust it off, and passed. So Harry Reid then was saying, he didn't want to go for it in the Senate unless he knew he had 60+ votes, and they had other things on the agenda at that time, and it kind of slipped away. But I haven't given up on that.
Yeah.
That's fascinating to me, because I think most people pick up their paper in the morning to look at the line scores, aren't really thinking about the paper going to bat for them in Washington to have freedom of the press. And it's got to be harder and harder and harder for newspapers to do that. You have a new publisher, you have a new editor over there. I guess circulation is not. How's that affecting circulation, and where do you see newspapers going in the next few years?
Well, I think that circulation numbers are public. And the Chronicle has had the biggest drop of circulation the last few years. Part of that is intentional, in that in order to help cut costs, we've sort of drawn in terms of areas. I mean, we used to talk about home delivery up in Tahoe. We just deliver on purpose fewer papers than we used to for cost reasons.
Well, you also jacked up the subscription fees. It's
Absolutely.
over $400 a year for home delivery.
Absolutely, and I pay $900 for the New York Times, so I know all these people, all the media companies are jacking up the price. But I mean, that was the circulation strategy of a year or so ago. Well, we believe that people are willing to pay more. 25 cents or even 50 cents is really nothing for all the great stuff you get in the paper. The problem being that papers have shrunk, so you get less than you used to get, and are asking more money. And there clearly is a point, I don't know that we've reached it yet, where people will say, no, I think I'll go to the web where I can get it for free.
So then that would suggest your audience is wealthier and more suburban. And did that have any influence in the decision by the editorial board not to endorse either Senator Boxer or her opponent, Carly Fiorina, in this fall's election? I was really stunned by that.
Well, I regret to tell you, Peter, that I had nothing to do with that decision. And so I don't feel in any way obliged to defend it or even talk about it. But you should get John Diaz on here someday and ask him about that. I think there's probably an interesting story there.
Okay, I'll take that as a partial answer.
Well, it's kind of an answer. It's a good enough answer. We'll take it. Newspapers, I think, generally had always been a lead into the TV news. TV's looking at the newspapers to sort of to go with their leads.
Let me just amplify that a little bit.
Sure.
Radio and TV stations stole on a daily basis the content of local newspapers in order to build out their newscasts.
We call it, Peter, we call it partnerships these days. We don't call it theft.
Well, you guys are in the news business. That's not my business. But Phil, you've been heard to say, or you've been quoted saying, the news business is broken and no one knows what to do about it. No one knows how to fix it. What do you mean by that, and what suggestions do you have for him?
Well, I said it a couple of years ago. I don't think it's necessarily less true, but I think the level of experimentation that's been going on has been encouraging. I mean, I talk to kids in graduate schools of journalism, and they are extraordinarily enthused about the craft, the profession, the calling. Plus they have, so for instance, at the J School in Berkeley, Knight has funded a media lab where they're studying multimedia and social media, and that all of that together doesn't represent, sort of the golden egg that will save us all. But what it means is people are paying more attention to what is going on in society and culture. I mean, I think for decades, we sort of suffered from this higher calling disease. And maybe it was out of the Watergate era, maybe it was before that, where we said, you know, we know what's best for you, and we're going to feed you your spinach, whether you like it or not. We're going to feed it to you and display it in ways that, you know, we think is best for you. We don't really care what you think.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the apocryphal story is the reporter who says, you know, I don't have time to talk to a reader. I'm busy doing journalism. And now we've sort of been forced to pay attention to people. Some of them are pretty out there, but nonetheless, it is a way we can do this. We did this at the Chronicle years ago. We had something called 2 Cents, which was a group of got to be about 3,000 people who came in individually, gave us their pictures, gave us all their contact information, and became essentially, you know, citizen,
Pundits.
not pundits or journalists, but citizens committed to the community of the Chronicle. So they became sources for us. If we wanted to know what do you think about the Bush speech last night, or, you know, anybody out there has had a laryngectomy or something because we're writing about it. And it was really a fabulous thing. And we now have that capability with many more people. We're just not quite sure how to use it.
Mm-hmm. Now, does the website at SF Gate give you any powerful information? Because over on the right-hand side, they list the most popular stories that people have been reading online.
Right.
Does that influence your choices and give us more Lindsay Lohan because the people who go to the web are looking for the latest on her and whether she's in jail tonight or not?
Well, my predecessor at the Examiner, Larry Kramer, went on to do Market Watch, and Marin lives in Marin.
Mm-hmm.
Once said, you know, if you put Madonna on the front page every day, you'd sell a lot of papers. Madonna, it shows you how long ago that was.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't think it. I think on a website, there's probably a little bit more of popular culture. But what is going on is this search engine optimization is the sort of one of the new buzz phrases, where if you use certain words in the story, or particularly in the headline, you will get a higher search ranking for that story. We have one guy on SF Gate who's one of our bloggers, outside bloggers, Zenny Abraham, and he's brilliant at it. And every day we look at the page rankings, and he's way up there. But, you know, is that traffic, you know, the traffic you want? Is it local? Is it people who are committed to reading you? Is it people who will stay with you? People who want to be part of the community? Or is it because, you know, Lindsay Lohan's in the headline?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it a new way to turn a phrase?
Well, it could be.
I
It could be.
don't know.
And, you know, is it a small price to pay for, you know, getting a bigger audience and therefore maybe surviving a little bit longer as a news organization?
Now, what about the Fox effect, agenda-driven journalism? Is that affecting print, and are people attempting to take the example of Fox News and turn that into a profit center of politicized information? I mean,
Well,
there's WorldNet Daily, but
These days, you know, we take almost anything to have it be a profit center. But well, other than the newspapers that Rupert owns, I think probably not very much. I do think that there's this sort of cauldron of, is it analysis, is it opinion, is it personality, is it point of view? And we don't really know. This is one of the great mythologies these days about journalism. None of us really have a clear definition of what those things are and what delineates them, and when does this, you know, point of view become an opinion. So we're all just kind of like scrambling around. But I do think with blogs and everything else that journalists are having more opportunities to express themselves, maybe in a more personal way.
Phil Bronstein, editor-at-large at Hearst Newspapers and a weekly columnist at the Chronicle. Great to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Greg Brockbank is a local attorney who's been a trustee of the Marin Community College District since 1989. He is serving in his first term as in the San Rafael City Council and owns the Marin Law Center here in San Rafael. He's married to the charming healthcare activist Esther Wanning. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you, thank you.
Greg, before we get started on your role in the City Council, tell us a little bit about the Marin Law Center and what do you do?
Well, Marin Law Center sounds, as I tell all my clients, like a clinic or a nonprofit. It's really a private law firm, but we are kind of like a clinic in that we emphasize lower fees. We charge less per hour. We take fewer hours to do things. We have flat fees for a lot of basic services, and we do brief consultations, and so we try to provide reasonably priced legal services, everything from divorces to living trusts to assistance with mostly tenants and general civil litigation.
Great, we'll send you a bill for that commercial.
Thank you for asking.
But we did ask. I've always wondered exactly what your day job is. Greg, you were an Obama delegate to the Democratic National Convention, and I saw you there in Denver in 2008. And you align with the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, as I do. And I'd like to know how that filters down and affects your work at the City Council, because City Council is really the most basic element of our government. So how do you find expression for your political philosophy?
Let's just say I've evolved a little bit in that. Of course, these local government positions are nonpartisan positions. Nobody sees your political party, and it really doesn't come up much. I mean, I'm sort of a political junkie, so I know who the Democrats and the Republicans are, but the casual observer might not know. Now, they do inform our core values as to issues like environmental protection, maybe labor, and some others, but these partisan issues don't really come up. As I learned in my first year when I said, what do you mean we can't get a resolution to get the troops out of Iraq or to impeach Bush and Cheney, or at least for single-payer health care? And no, there's no interest in that among my colleagues, or frankly, those of any other city council in Marin. So I had to learn that no, we don't do those things on city councils. Even though I thought once in a while we can't, even though it would save a lot of money in the city if we had a single-payer healthcare system, but that doesn't mean I'm not still very interested. I'm not an activist on those issues, but just not so much on the city council.
Mm-hmm.
But there are issues here in San Rafael, and one of the issues right now seems to be a Target. And the Target wants to build one of those big box stores out there by Home Depot. And there's going to be traffic, and there's all kinds of other issues, and the city council has to deal with that. What are you hearing from people out on the street about whether they want it, whether they don't want it, or where do you see that coming down?
I think I've gotten more feedback, especially the last few days, but for weeks now, than any other single issue. In fact, probably more than all the other issues put together. I thought it was amazing when I was getting dozens of emails a day. I'm now up to 100 or 200 emails a day. You can barely get through your email box. Now, some of them are form letter orchestrated campaigns. The issues, by the way, this is going to be decided on Monday evening, December 6th, while this show is airing, I understand. We're taping it a few days in advance here. But the issues are, on the one hand, $675,000 projected in additional sales tax revenue for the city, 250 to 300 jobs, most of whom will be local, which we need. And frankly, I think most of our residents would like to see a variety of low-priced home goods for sale in the city of Santa Fe, which we now lack. On the other hand, there are those that say, yes, there are going to be traffic problems. These are not good jobs. They're not high-paying jobs. They are going to cause more problem than it's worth. Frankly, the quality of the merchandise is such that a lot of it's made in China, wrapped in a lot of plastic, going to be in the landfill soon. It's not a very sustainable business model. But you got to kind of take things as you see them. Now, we're not allowed to take any positions until we've heard from the public, and when we've heard all the public speakers, then we'll make a decision. But suffice to say, there's a couple of dozen good arguments on both sides, and we're developing the counter arguments and the counter to the counter to the counter arguments. And when we listen to everybody, then we make our little few-minute speech and vote, and we'll see what happens. It was.
And Greg, one of the aspects of this is that Target is now featuring large grocery sections in their stores. This would put them into competition with Mi Pueblo, the Latino grocery store in East San Rafael. We've seen the local IGA chain is going out of business. They've lost their lease. And United Markets, which has, I believe, 3 stores in this area, is kind of leading the charge in opposing approval of this new Target. Do you see a community interest in preserving local businesses like United, or is it a hopeless effort to try to take on the inevitable expansion of these big box stores, which is the pattern we've seen, the Walmartization of America?
That's a good question. We get that a lot. In fact, a lot of the complaints about it have been just that. On the other hand, Home Depot came in 12 years ago, and Jackson's Hardware screamed that, it's going to put us out of business. Well, Jackson's Hardware survived and thrived, as did Orchard Supply Hardware and a lot of other hardware stores. So there's no guarantee that this
Yeah, but Yardbirds is gone, and Home Depot swallowed them up and then closed it.
Right. I'm not saying there aren't any casualties ever, but people adapt and thrive. We just got a memo from our city attorney saying it is improper for us to use as an excuse to vote no on Target the idea that we can't, we don't favor national chains over local businesses. The Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution, as interpreted by the U.S. Supreme Court, says that it is improper to favor local businesses and exclude chains because they might be more competitive. So we cannot use that as a reason to reject Target. There are lots of other reasons, and Who knows how it'll come out? I'm sure we're all balancing this very carefully. The Planning Commission voted 5-2 to recommend it. We'll see what happens when it comes before the City Council.
So if we could switch subjects to another hot button in San Rafael, those red light cameras. I think there are currently 2 of them around. You're the one city council person who voted against the project. There's been a series of articles recently in one of the local web papers.
Yeah, San Rafael Patch. We'll put the link up on the screen.
By Richard Rappaport about the article and about the $500 fine with some astounding findings. One of the findings we hear is that the money just doesn't go to San Rafael, but it's going all over the place, and including an Australian company with offices in Arizona. What do we do about this? What's going on?
Redflex is the leading purveyor. You send out a request for proposals, they make all these bids. Redflex seems to get the bids. My concerns were, as a 20-year board member of the local ACLU, I have some privacy concerns, but my major concern was that are we just gouging our residents and nearby residents for parking ticket money because we're suddenly giving out 10 times as many tickets? And are we really making anything safer? Well, our police say we are. And they came back 6 months later. We put them in about a year ago, and they've come back now and said, well, we think we're reducing the accidents. Well, it's a tough call. They're only at one intersection, 2 different directions on one intersection.
3rd and Irwin.
Yep, and it's tricky. We don't make any. First of all, let me set the record straight. We don't make any money on this. The extra revenue we get just covers the extra officers' time to go to court on the tickets that are challenged. So,
and Greg, to that point, up on the screen right now, we're showing people the breakdown of the nearly $500 that you have to pay if you get a red light citation, and only $139 goes to the city of San Rafael. And these other funds, a state surcharge, criminal offenses, DNA, additional penalty assessment of $10. I mean, this is a kind of government extortion where we're picking on people who happen to miss the light, and some of them missed it by 1/10 of a second. These are not people who said, oh, that light's red, I'm going through it. These are people who missed. And the timing of the yellow light, for example, is something that is beyond the control of the motorist, but it can be rigged in a way to generate more of these tickets. And the bottom line is that this one red light camera alone in the first 7 months generated $1.6 million in fines from the driving public in Marin. And I think the offset is that there are 2,600 people who are really, 3,200 people who are really pissed off, and they don't want to cooperate with law enforcement.
that's my biggest concern. Now, the good news and the bad news on the yellow light timing is this. We actually expanded the timing on the yellow light. There's a requirement that it has to be, I forget how many seconds, but now we expanded a little bit. So the good news is it's not like we're shortening the period of the yellow light so we can get more tickets. We expanded it in order to give people an extra little split-second break, but that seems to throw off all our statistics. So how can we compare the number of accidents before we expanded the duration of the yellow lights and after, when it's comparing apples to oranges? So I question the validity of those statistics and many others. But it's a tough call. I mean, on one hand, there may be a few more rear-enders because people slam on their brakes, but maybe it'll prevent some really bad head-ons when somebody's rushing through the intersection and run the red light inadvertently or otherwise, and then they slam into somebody and there's a really bad injury. They say there's supposed to be a halo effect where that you say, oh, there's a red light camera, oh, I better be more careful, and then they pay more attention not only in that intersection but all the surrounding intersections and all around town, so there's less red light running and less accidents, and theoretically it frees up our officers to go in the neighborhoods where we want them. That's what they say. I don't know that I've seen that yet. I think we need a little more time to evaluate this.
And my understanding is this ticket you get is like a little present in the mail a couple of months after the violation has allegedly occurred.
Well, it comes with pictures of you and the people in the car. It's a keepsake.
Yes, it's a website. You go on the website and you see yourself running it and say, well, I guess I can't fight that one. They got me dead to rights. So it's no.
But Greg, in addition, I don't want to just talk about San Rafael, but in San Anselmo, we're seeing enhanced enforcement over trivial matters, seatbelt tickets, and people believe that the cops are being sent out to generate more revenue. And if you need more revenue for the police departments, hold a bake sale and I'll be there. But don't alienate the public with this kind of crackdown that most people believe is revenue-based.
It's a very good point. Of course, I can't speak for other cities. I don't know about that, although I have heard occasional rumors over the years, even before I got on the city council myself, that some cities are tougher than others. The cops lie in wait and they give you tickets. They'd probably deny that. Or maybe they just say, yes, we're tougher. We try to get them. But I think you raise a very good point about they may win a battle and raise some more ticket money, but they may lose the war if they damage their relationship with their citizenry or even the visiting folks that are coming into work. If they so fracture the relationship with law enforcement, that's doing more harm than good, I would argue. I agree with your point.
Greg, let us give you a little break on this. Tell us what's happening that's good in town.
All kinds of good things, actually. I mean, we were suffering like everybody else. We had a couple of rounds of layoffs a year and a half ago, and we're now down, I think, 12% in staffing and 7% in budget. We are engaging in pension reform like everybody else. We have the first and only climate change action plan in Marin County. We're very proud of it. We got the first award, the Beacon Award, in the state of California for being enrolled in this program. We're engaging in a new city manager search. SMART is coming to town, although it's going to stop at the Civic Center. Maybe eventually it'll come to downtown Santa Fe and ultimately to Larkspur.
Time for a name change.
Yeah, the hopefully optimistic, maybe SMART, but maybe not. It's tough now. But and finally,
Either that or we need a sugar daddy, a bailout.
The big one coming down the road is going to be Marin Square. Sutter bought up Marin Square a few years ago. Within a few years, they're probably going to want to turn that into a big outpatient medical clinic to compete with Marin General. And that's going to be the tough one. These will be good paying jobs, unlike Target. These, this is, on the other hand, you think Target's controversial, try Sutter. Mm-hmm. So that'll be a real tough one coming up. But hey, that's why they pay us the big bucks, equivalent to, you want fries with that?
Do you earn the minimum wage as a council member?
Well, we put in about 20 hours a week and we get paid about a few $100s a month.
Greg Brockbank, member of the City Council in San Rafael. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Greg. Peter, it's that time again to pick one of our electeds to come talk to us. We haven't done it in a month or so.
320 plus elected officials in Marin County.
Pick me a winner, buddy.
And this green card is the lucky one today. Christiana Ralby of the Dixie School District. Watch out, Christiana. We're going to be in touch with you to invite you to be a guest on the next edition of Marin Voices and Views.
I'm looking forward to meeting her.
Thanks for watching.